Mr. Construction Design here. I'm going to show you guys real quick how to patch sheetrock. I'm going to try to make this as short and quick as possible. I know that a lot of people are really, skeptical or scared to patch their own sheetrock, and it's a super easy, super simple process. So let's dive right in. So today I am replacing an old hood with this new hood, and the old hood came down about, I think it was about 7 inches. It was about 8 inches down, so it covered up this hole that they had in the sheetrock. And this new one that I'm putting in is only 6 inches. So you're going to be able to see that whole hole. So we are going to patch it. First thing I did, actually before we get into that, I'll show you real quick some of the stuff you're going to need. You don't necessarily need everything, but it will make it easier on you. Such as like a sheetrock pan. You don't need a sheetrock pan. You could use a Tupperware container, or, anything like that. You don't need a big sponge. You could use your sponge for your sink sponge. There's just some of this stuff that you don't really need, but some that'll make it easier. So, first things first, let me throw this in the tripod here. Get you aimed up. All right, so here we go. So what I like to do is, I just actually had this scrap piece of sheetrock sitting around, and so all I did is I measured my hole, and I added about 1 inch to it, just to a little bit, allow a little bit of overage. So it was about 19 inches. Hacked my sheetrock off, held my sheetrock up to the wall, took my pencil and just scribed around the sheetrock, came back with my sheetrock saw and cut out along my scribe line. Really quick, simple, easy to do. And I nailed it back in just so you could see the big hole that used to be there before. So now I'm left with an even bigger hole. So first thing you gotta do is you gotta make sure you have something to screw your new piece of sheetrock into. In this case, I have a stud over here, but for this side, I'm gonna go ahead and I just had a little scrap piece of wood sitting around. So I'm gonna go ahead and take some sheetrock screws, just little 1.25 inch sheetrock screws. I'm gonna hold this piece of wood here behind the sheetrock. Throw probably 3 or 4 screws into it. It's all going to get covered up with mud, so don't worry about the screw hole. Don't overthink it. It's really super simple, easy. So now I got backing over here for sheetrock, backing right there where my stud's at. My wall feels relatively flat and smooth. If you have places that are sticking out or big bumps, you can take a razor blade and kind of trim off the edge a little bit if your cut wasn't really nice and even, just to make the mudding process a little bit easier. But once again, not that necessary. All right, next thing, piece of sheetrock that I scribed my line out to. Boom. Throw it in there. And we're gonna throw a couple of screws in here. Just a little piece, so don't even really need very many screws. All right. So, how fast and simple and easy was that? So now we got our new piece of sheetrock in there. Next thing we're gonna do is take some sheetrock tape. And let's see if I can find the end on it. That's sometimes the trickiest part. And we're going to take a razor blade. You could also use your sheetrock knife just as fast. And not going for anything pretty here. About 1 inch wider than your cut. Doesn't matter if you do sides first, top first, bottom first, doesn't matter. Doesn't have to be perfectly even. Just slap it on there and go. Oh. This, if you use this fiber mesh tape, one side of it has a slight sticky edge, and that just lets it stick up there without you holding it. So it's really convenient. You could also use paper tape. Paper tape's a little bit cheaper, but it doesn't stick up there for you, so you gotta mess around with the mud a little bit more. Fiber tape is just a little bit quicker. All right. So next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna mix up some mud. So let's get this thing down here on the ground. All right. Now you could use any number of muds. They have all-purpose mud. They have topping mud, which means it's the topping, it's the texture layer. You could use that, or you can use what they call like a fast set mud. Or hot mud, which is basically a powder sheetrock mud, and you mix it with water, and you can buy it in different what they call sets. So you can buy like set 5, set 20, set 40, and what that basically means is you have that amount of time to work with it until it starts hardening, until it starts flashing off. So what I normally carry in my trailer is set 40. That means that I have about 40 minutes to work with it before it starts flashing off and getting hard. So what's nice about using a hot mud is you can do the whole project in a matter of 2 or 3 hours versus having to wait a day or two for mud to dry if you use traditional sheetrock mud. So what we're going to do, we're going to grab some of this set 40 powder. I don't know, we're just gonna guess here. That should be plenty. It's just your first coat, so it doesn't need to be too much. Throw it in the bottom. We're gonna add some water. And you're going for kind of a peanut butter consistency, pretty thick, but not too thick where you can't work it. A little bit too much water here. Maybe not. Let's see. Yeah, I just want to add a hair bit more powder. Not much. So you want it at a consistency where it pretty much stays where it's at. Sticks on your mud knife. Not too thick, not too thin. Pretty nice consistency here. Like some kind of thin peanut butter, I guess you would call it. All right, so now we got that on there. Let me flip this camera back around. All right, so you normally do about 2 coats of mud for a little patch like this. You can try to do it in 1 coat, but it doesn't normally turn out that great. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna literally just slap this stuff on. We are not worrying about where we're getting it. We're just getting mud on the patch. We're not worrying about getting it too far. We're just covering all of our tape. Maybe, I don't know, two inches or so past all the tape, 2-3 inches. All right, so we got a lot of mud on the wall. Now we can come back and kind of smooth it out a little. And all that smoothing it out is doing is making it so we're sanding less in the end. So I'm just gonna lightly go left, scrape it back into my pan. Or actually, that was go right, then go left. And we're not trying to take off too much. We're more or less just letting our knife skim across with very, very little pressure on it. You're gonna see the tape is starting to show through. That's okay. Normally, first coat, you can see tape through it. Some areas will cover, some areas won't. That's all right. So what I like to do now is your knife, it helps if you have a really flexible knife. So if you can take it and you can bend it and you can flex it, can you see there how half of it stays straight, half of it can flex? And what that allows you to do is you can put one edge flat against the sheetrock and you can twist your handle and bring this edge off. And what that makes it do is you don't have hard lines in your sheetrock. So if I go like this, oh, of course, it didn't do it for me there. You see right there, I have a hard line. Now, if you hold this in tight to the sheetrock and let this in kind of float out a little bit, it doesn't give you your hard line by slightly twisting your knife. So what we're gonna do here, I'm gonna cover this stuff up just a little bit, is we're gonna go around the outside edge and we're going to flex our blade. So out here where there's no sheetrock mud is where we want this nice and tight, and then out here in the mud, we want this to actually be slightly off the mud. So we're gonna come around here. We're gonna take off just a little bit. So I don't know if you can see that. I'm tight out here and I'm floating out here. What that's doing is it's scraping nice and tight around all the edges. That way I don't have excess mud out here. I'm gonna play with this just a little bit more, cover this tape on this first coat just a little bit better. Don't have to, but I'm trying to get this hopefully done today. All right, so I'm gonna just slightly float this, slightly float, come back this way. And you're not going for perfection here. It doesn't really matter. You can sand out any big lines you have, so don't worry about it too much. So I got this basically covered, and I'm gonna go back around, feather out that outside edge. And it looks like I uncovered everything I just did. Oh well, we'll do another coat here. All right, so we're gonna give that about half an hour, 40 minutes, let that start to harden, and then we're gonna come back for the second coat. All right. I just wanted to show you guys what it looks like when it starts to dry. You can see how here the first like 2 inches all the way around the edges is getting that real white look, and the rest of it still has that kind of creamy look. That's because this is still just slightly wet. It's not necessarily wet to the touch, like I can touch it, run my hand across it, and I'm not smearing it around anymore. It's flashed off that much. But you could tell that it's really wet. So when we come in the next step and we go and sand, what you're gonna end up doing is, if it still has this creamy look, you're gonna end up gumming up your sander. So you can see this here. This was from a previous job where I started sanding just a little bit too early. And that's not to say that it can't have any of this creamy color in it, but you want the majority of it to be white. You know, if there's little blotches of the creaminess, you know, it doesn't matter. But, you know, yeah, just let it, you know, get it so that it's mostly white. And if it's not going as fast as what you'd want, you can always take a blow dryer and use a blow dryer on it. That'll dry it out really fast. Or you can put a space heater down on the floor below it and let all that heat rise up to that area where you're working. Or you could even use a fan, you know, like this one here. I threw my little work fan underneath it so that I'm just circulating air up in and around that area where I'm working. And that's making it flash off that much faster. So I just thought I'd give you guys that quick little tip while I'm still waiting for this to dry just, you know, a little bit more. It probably needs about another 10 minutes and most of that'll flash off. So, all right, that's it. All right, guys, we're back. And it's been roughly about an hour or so. You can see that there is still a couple spots that just have a little bit of moisture in them. I don't know if you can tell, but you can kind of see over here, up in here, a little bit around these edges. But if you're to touch it, it's all dry, it's all hard. You're not, you know, there's nothing soft about it. So next thing I like to do is I like to knock down any ridges I have, if I have any real high spots. So let's see if we can see this here. So you can kind of see this this line right there. That's just a mark from my knife, from my putty knife. You can see this little blip right here, you know, a little bit here. So there's a couple little spots that I just want to knock down, and that way when I go put my next coat, it goes on just that much smoother. So first thing I'll do is I'll take my knife and I'll just kind of run it perpendicular to anything I want to knock off. And you can kind of see here, it's just scraping the top off of that, just taking off that high spot. So there we go. I got a nice even level there. And you can also take your knife and put it up against the wall this way, and you can see if there's any major places that need knocked down. So keep on going here, a little bit through here. Knock that little spot off there. And I'll hit all the edges here just to kind of clean them up a little bit. Make sure I knock off any little blips that I have out there. So you can see here it was a little bit wet here still. So when I just did that, I actually took out a little bit. That's all right, we're about to do another coat. All right, so got all my high spots knocked down. So second coat, I've already mixed it up. But this one here, I like to do a little bit thicker in the first coat. And I would call this one like a true peanut butter consistency. It is not a ton thicker, but it is quite a bit thicker. You know, I can shake it around. It moves on there, but it doesn't just fall off that easily. So it's pretty thick. So let's get going. And we're gonna do the same thing here. We're gonna coat the whole thing. We're just gonna slap it on there. We're not... No technique or anything. We're just pushing it all in. More mud. We're gonna get it all on there, and then we'll worry about troweling it all out and making her look a little better. And also on this coat, I like to go just slightly beyond where I did on my previous coat on the first coat. Get out there a little bit. All right, so we got a really nice thick coat on there. So now we're gonna start, and we're just gonna go across, work it back and forth, try to get it pretty even. Once again, we're not going for perfection here. We got sandpaper, so we can do our final sanding and get it as nice as we want. So I'm just gonna do a general wipe off, left, then right. More left, then right, then right. Kind of working in a contained space here between these cabinets, so I'm just kind of working a little bit of a rainbow shape here. That way I don't have lots of excessive trowel marks. All right, so there we go. We got a second coat on, nice and thick coat. Not so thick that it's really bumping out the wall, but just thick enough to cover everything. And that way we can just sand this in our third and final stage and spray on some texture. All right, I'm gonna let this dry for same thing, probably about 40 minutes, an hour, something like that. Put the fan on it just to speed it up, and we'll be back as soon as we're ready. All right, guys, we're back, and we're here for this final and last stage. So, we will start out by doing the same thing we did on the last round, just taking our knife and kind of scraping over and knocking off any high spots that are sticking out. I think we're good to go. So we got our scrapes. Now we're gonna take our sanding sponge. We're lightly gonna sand this. Just if you feel it with your hand, you can kind of feel anywhere that's kind of a little bit rough. And then we're gonna kind of take it and kind of start to feather in the edges. That way when we go to texture, it'll have a better transition. You won't see kind of this little hard line where the mud got onto the texture, where it's smooth here over and bumpy here down. So we'll take this guy, do a light sand. These outside edges. Go. All right, so that is nice and smooth. Now, the one last thing that I like to do before texturing is I like to take a sponge and have it just be a little bit damp, not sopping wet, just a little bit damp. And I like to feather in this edge just a little bit more. And I'll start from your painted surface and I just kind of rub it up and in. And all that is it's kind of reconstituting the mud a little bit on the edge where it's really thin, and it's feathering it in. And that way, if the sanding sponge didn't do a good enough job feathering that edge, this wet sponge will. And the other thing you can do is, anywhere you got the mud out there in the texture too far, you can clean it up a little bit. In this case, most of this patch is going to be hidden behind the hood, so it's not really going to matter too much. But just for the video's sake, I'm doing it anyway. Then I'll wipe down the whole thing, just get the dust off. Way it's a nice clean surface for the texture to grab onto. All right. So, texture time. So you got to look at your wall and kind of figure out what it is. There's a lot of YouTube videos on whatnot about figuring out what texture you have. In this case, it's a really heavy knockdown texture. So what I have here is a knockdown texture from Sherwin-Williams. And to be honest with you, I don't like this stuff. It's not a very good product. But like I said, most of this is going to be covered, so I don't really care too much. I much prefer to use like the Homax, the the big cans of the Homax with the adjustable knob on them, those actually work quite well. So I don't recommend this one, but go for like a Homax from Lowe's or Home Depot. Now, one tip for these guys, if you're working somewhere where it's really cold outside or cold inside, run this can under hot water for, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes and just heat up the liquid inside. It'll spray out so much better than a cold can. So I've already shaken this a bit, but let me shake it a little more. And as you can see, I've masked off the area. You don't have to have masking paper. You could use newspaper and some Scotch tape, you know, it doesn't matter. I just happen to have this for painting, so it was nice and handy. All right, so next thing I'm gonna do before I actually spray it on the wall, I almost always spray it onto a piece of paper, cardboard, or something first to test the pattern, to make sure, 1, that it's spraying, 2, not being all globby, and 3, that it's gonna match about the texture that I'm doing. All right, I'm gonna put that down just a little bit. Sorry, trying to get, there we go. All right, so you just want to do an even pattern. Don't just splotch, 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 you know, do the same thing throughout. And after you're all done, you can come back if you see some spot that really needs it a little bit more, whatever, say the can wasn't spraying evenly, then hit it afterwards. So let's go. Don't hold the can very close either. You'll get a really uneven pattern when you're real close. The further back you are, the better. Now, last and final tip is when you do this, you can see where gravity has just kind of brought some of this down. It's just fallen. But always texture onto your old texture, you know, 8 or 10 inches. Try to fade it out so that after you're done painting, you don't just see a hard line of old texture, new texture. Try to just lightly fade out. So let's see here. Go a little left, little right. Just to kind of make that all blend in. That way, after it's all done, painted, everything looks pretty darn uniform. So I like that. I'm gonna go ahead and leave that. I'm gonna let this dry for about 15 minutes, then I'm gonna come back and just do a little bit thicker of a coat, or another coat, so that it's a little bit thicker, because my wall texture is a little thicker than what this is spitting out. So we will come back here in about 15 minutes. All right, we are back. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna do another light coat on the texture. So last time I went left to right, this time I'm gonna go up to down, that way I can keep an even pattern. It's actually almost there, but I just want to build up that texture just a little bit more. That way it's a little bit more like what we already have on the existing walls. So let's go for it. We're just going to fade down a little bit here. Oh, just got out of texture anyway. Alright, I think we're looking pretty good on that one. That one looks much better. Much better. Okay, I'm happy with that. So, with that being said, I'm going to give that another 15 minutes or so. Let that dry. I will go ahead and paint it, and then I'll bring you back and let you see the final result. Alright. Alright guys, so this is the finished product. I only have light from one way here, so you can kind of see there, that's the old texture down here, which actually isn't a very good texture. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but you know what, by the time that a backsplash goes on here, the hood goes in, the stove goes in, you're not going to see very much there. So it's more than good enough for what it is. So don't be afraid to, you know, patch your sheetrock yourself. It's really not that hard. Just follow some of those simple steps I gave you and take it on. All right, guys, have a good one.